You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Get ready to expand your mind. This is Psychology's Outer Limits with your host, Professor of Psychology, Erick R. Williams.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Psychology's Outer Limits. I am your host, Professor Erick Williams, and we are live on Inception Radio Network. If it's Sunday night and it's 7 p.m., or between 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, then you know that the show is live. If you want to call in, and I hope you do, the phone number is 888-919-2355. And if you go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com, you can click on the banner there for chat and join the chat room. And the chat room is always fun. Lots of really cool people in there. And hello, Rachel, and the other people in there, and Rocket and Paulie and a few others, and Sky. We have Android and iOS apps, another way to listen to us with your phones or your tablets. You can send me mail at livepsych, L-I-V-E, just the word live and the word, well, the shortcut P-S-Y-C, livepsych@mail.com. On Twitter, we are at I_R_N. So that's I_R_N. And our trusty producer, MJ, is watching that. At Facebook, you can find this show at Psychology's Outer Limits. So it's the word psychology with an S on the end, and then outer, O-U-T-E-R, and then limits. It's a long word, anyway. I only have 6 likes right now. This is really not good for my self-esteem, folks. Please go to the page and like it, and then hopefully I will feel a lot better next week psychologically. Let's see. And then right after this show, Sunday's nice. You get a bunch of live shows. We have Pang Radio with MJ and Ken, and they will be talking to Kevin Randall about the Roswell slides. And let's see, what else do we got going on here? Also, check out the YouTube channel for Inception Radio Network. Currently getting all of the shows on there. I think there's about 500 people on there so far that are checking it out, and they're slowly getting all the shows on there. There is an archive on the regular site. But it's nice to know you can go to YouTube and do as well. Okay. Hello to Jameson on the chat room. That's my son. Let's see. I think I've covered all the stuff here. So as usual, we're going to go through, what's new in psychology. And the show is called the Outer Limits. So I do like to try to find some of the stuff that's way out there on the edge. And a little bit of parapsychology, just to keep it interesting. I think this evening, though, I want to start with something, I guess it's a little bit humorous. I told people in the chat room about this before the show. Phrases that make me crazy. I don't know. I this comes up once in a while on other shows, but there are some phrases that make me absolutely nuts. So I have a short list, and then you can jump into the chat room or Twitter and throw in some of yours if you don't hear it on this list. But number 1, it is what it is. I mean, that really does make me nuts. What does that mean? It's like a tautology in philosophy. It is what it is. That's like saying 1 equals 1. I think it's what people say when they want you to shut up, or when they're losing an argument. They go, well, it is what it is. and say, okay, I think I already knew that. Getting tired of the phrase reaching out. We used to say, I'm going to, give a call or talk to or get a hold of, and now we reach out to people. We don't reach out to our customers anymore. We reach out to our partners. Everyone's our partner. And they've also pressed partner into service as a verb. We're going to partner with so-and-so. So partnering makes me nuts. At the end of the day, I'm not sure what that means at the end of the day. Did that used to mean something else? Did that mean when, I think we could jump ahead to, I think at the end of the day is supposed to mean when all is said and done. Why do we need these phrases anyway? It drives me nuts. At the end of the day, I don't know. What else do we have here? Oh, yes, to tell you the truth. When people tell me that, I honestly do sometimes say, does that mean that in the future, unless you tell me you're telling me the truth, I should worry that you're not telling me the truth? Why are you telling me the truth now? Why don't you just tell me the truth all the time? We'll just have that agreement between you and I. You'll always tell me the truth, and then you don't have to preface your comment. Or with all due respect. When someone starts out with all due respect, I have the feeling I'm about to get slapped in the face. Otherwise, why would they say that? Net. I think that means the bottom line. I'm not sure. That one doesn't bother me too much. I don't know. A lot of these come from the world of business. Let's see. Oh, how about 50 is the new 30? 50 is not the new 30. I'm 57. I don't feel 37. I feel 57. I know what I felt like when I was 30. And I think, I'm 6'5", 190 pounds. I'm in good health. I think I'm doing well for a 50-year-old, but I'm not 30. I mean, does that mean is 100 the new 70? Why do people say things like that? I think it has to do with our culture of youth, where we're terribly afraid of growing old and terribly afraid of dying. So we say things like 50 is the new 30. When you're 30, you know that you have not lived half your life. And when you're 50, you know that, you can hear the clock ticking, not loudly, but it's clicking. Okay, what's next? Failure is not an option. Well, you know what? It is too. 50 may not be the new 30, but it's long enough to be alive to know that you will fail with things. That's how we learn. We fail and we try something else. Most scientific experiments end in failure, but they point you in the direction to do it right. I understand what they mean. I guess what they mean is try really hard. But when you tell someone failure is not an option, I wonder if the amount of pressure you put on them isn't going to hurt their performance. How about everything happens for a reason? I think we say that to make ourselves feel better. I think some things are just, random. Does everything have to happen? If everything happened for a reason, I guess that would mean you believed in predestination. That means you have no choice. Everything that ever happens to you was preordained at your birth or before your birth. I don't know. Everything happens. I mean, there is a reason. If you fall down, it's because you tripped over something. But I don't know. I think people say that when they wish they had had a different outcome. Oh, here's another one. The way people use the word literally. I literally died laughing. No, you didn't, because you're telling me that you laughed. So you didn't die. One time on a football forecast, that wasn't a forecast, my gosh, with a football show, and the one of the announcers said that he literally ripped his head off. Well, then I would expect the player's head to be rolling around on the field. Literally means it actually happened. So you can't literally die laughing. You can laugh very, very hard. I'm being really anal, aren't I? I understand. Bear with me. I'm allowed to be anal. Because I'm a psychologist, and we are a bit odd. If you've known a psychologist, you know we're odd. Maybe that's why we go into psychology. And then the last one on my list is whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Really? You ever seen anybody have a stroke? Or how about a persistent vegetative state? I think there's a lot of things that don't kill you that don't make you stronger. And I understand the notion behind it. Let me check out the chat room here. Let's see, Road Warrior. He likes the phrase, I like, it is what it is. Okay, well, it is what it is, Road Warrior. And let's see, Rachel says, I don't believe everything happens for a reason. I just believe that sometimes poop happens. I cleaned that up a little bit. Okay, now, if you think of some more, just go ahead and put them up on the chat room, and I can keep it running as a theme throughout the show. Now, I've got some articles I want to go through. I want to talk a little bit about why paranormal and psychology bangs heads and why I think it shouldn't. And let's see. Oh, and then our topic today, our real life psychology topic, will be depression, because it is the most common disorder on the planet. No matter where you go on the planet, the most common emotional disorder will be there will be depression. So let's see here. Let's jump into what's new. I found some really cool stuff this week. Oh, by the way, remember last week we were talking about the Charlie game? I talked about, I don't know that I started that, but it popped up on a few other paranormal talk radio shows. I'd like to think I started it because it would make my ego even bigger. But anyway, I heard, or maybe I'm just more sensitive to it since I read about it. But let's start with, let's see. Young men, okay, here's an article. Young men are facing a crisis of masculinity. And that's a pretty common thing these days, the masculinization of men. But a leading psychologist has warned that young men are facing a crisis of masculinity due to excessive use of video games and pornography. Now, online porn is a problem. Therapists will tell you it's a problem. It's a problem for men because they become addicted to it. And then they find that, and if you got little kids in the family, put your hands over their ears, I guess, I don't know. It is hard for your female partner to compete with, with what you're seeing on the screen. Okay, anyway, back to the article. Psychologist and professor emeritus at Stanford University, Philip Zimbardo. Now, he's like one of the top handful of names in psychology. He's written like 6 million books, and he's made several million videos, and he's just, if you've had even one psychology class, you've heard the name Philip Zimbardo. He's actually got that little beard, little chin kind of beard, and black hair. He looks evil, but he's a really nice guy. Oh, anyway. He's been around a long time. And this is part of his latest book, Man Disconnected. So anyway, he spoke about the results of his study on BBC, and he said, our focus is on young men who play video games to excess and do it in social isolation. They are alone in their room. Now, with freely available pornography, which is unique in history because you used to have to pay for it, they're combining playing video games and, as a break, watching on average 2 hours of pornography a week. Just a wild guess here, but I'm thinking that's a conservative figure. So Zimbardo says there is a crisis among young men, a higher number of whom are experiencing a new form of addiction to excessive use of pornography and video games. And he also talked about this as a TED Talk, and he cited the example of a mother he met while conducting the study whose son does not see the problem in playing video games for up to 15 hours a day. That sounds pretty excessive. So he says this is affecting the minds of young men, and it actually functionally changes their brain. It changes the reward center of their brain, which is where dopamine primarily is at work. And their brain comes to need and want the video games and the porn in order to feel, reasonably good. So their brains are being digitally rewired. And you can see how that could be a problem. Now, this is complicated research because it also overlaps with social psychology. For example, we don't really believe that watching violent video games makes children violent. That's a correlation. A correlation is when two variables move predictably together. So we know, for example, that as hours of violent TV, for example, or violent video games go up, the number of violent acts go up. But correlation just means that two things are related. You can't make a causal statement. Because when we study it more deeply, we find it's just simply more likely that violent kids play more violent games and they watch more violent TV. So you have to be careful when you hear things like this, because you have to ask yourself, are they saying that A causes B, or A is simply related to B? But this demasculinization, boy, try saying that when you got allergies, it's quite a topic. We hear about it a lot. Men feel like they're put in a position of women still would like their males to be reasonably masculine, but at the same time very sensitive and cry at movies and all that. And it's a little hard to do both. And we're not exactly hardwired that way. You know, men produce androgens, primarily testosterone, and women produce, you know, estrogens, primarily estrogen. So it goes a little bit against our wiring. I think it's not a bad thing for the two sexes to learn how to communicate better. But there is a lot of research out there, and a lot of men are complaining a little bit. You know, I can't be both. But I think women can relate too, because they feel like they have to fill so many roles during the day. Let's see, Analog Hole asks, can this also relate to the hours upon hours of TV that people watch, or even reading books? Yeah, but in a different way. Excuse me, watching TV is a very passive activity. It doesn't do much for your brain. And your brain really is a use it or lose it proposition. I saw a piece of research that said if you played 2 games of Scrabble a week, or 2 sessions of games with friends, you would greatly reduce the chance of ever developing Alzheimer's. And that's because when you play games like that, you make your brain do something novel. But when you watch TV, you simply watch. There's not a whole lot going on in your brain. I'm not sure that would count if you were watching stuff like the History Channel. On the other hand, it's my opinion. I don't have any research about this, but it's my opinion that surfing the net is good for your brain, because if you're truly surfing, you're hopping around and you keep ending up at places you weren't at before. And, you know, you start out looking up, you know, how many gallons of gas your car holds, and an hour later you're reading about the migration patterns of whales. You know, that's new stuff. That's good for you. Playing games is good for you. There was a really famous study called the nun study. You know, like nuns, the women with the hats on. I went to Catholic school, so I had nuns. Anyway, you know, a group of psychologists and psychologists sort of noticed that nuns tended not to develop dementia. The most common form of dementia, of course, is Alzheimer's. So they asked a group of nuns if, at the end of their lives, they would donate their brains to science. I didn't even know you could do that. I only recently found out that us Catholics can do that, and we can be cremated. And, you know, here I thought I was a good Catholic and knew all the rules. But let's get back to our nuns. Anyway, so as they died, and they also tended to live, you know, quite a long life into their 80s, what they found were these really healthy-looking brains. And, you know, the best connection they could make were that these nuns, they were school sisters of Notre Dame, you know, they taught their whole life. They were always using their brain. And using their brain to help prevent the development of these, I'm simplifying a little bit here, but these amyloid protein plaques that sort of kill brain tissue. So yeah, if you use your brain, you're probably not going to get dementia. It's rare for a person with a graduate degree to get dementia unless they are biologically predisposed. Some people simply are going to get it. Just like people who never smoke are going to get cancer. I mean, there are some things that you know, we have a genetic marker for, and, you know, what are you going to do? But otherwise, you know, surfing the net, playing games, reading books on new things, those things all, you know, they all work your brain, and I think they're good. I think fiction is good because when you read fiction, I think you're trying to make pictures in your brain, and you're creating the characters as you go along. Again, I don't have any research to back that up, but Rachel says she watches mostly documentaries. I think that would be good for your brain. Watching documentaries would be like surfing the net. But I think a lot of people are kind of surprised to hear that surfing the net would be good for you. But it is good for you. And playing certain kinds of games are good for you, especially, games like Scrabble, where you really have to work a bit. Now, before we move on to our next topic, tomorrow is the second 5 weeks of the summer session. So at 9 a.m., I got a brand new class of students ready to rock and roll. We meet twice a week, 4 hours each time. It's brutal for them. It's a little hard for me, too. It's a long time to talk. But, one of the very first things we cover in psychology is, who are these people? Because people are a little confused about, what is a counselor? What is a psychologist? What is a psychiatrist? And the biggest distinction, if you only took one thing away from this, is that a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. They get a medical degree, and then they do study in psychology, partly by doing it, working in psychiatric wards. There is a level of psychiatrist called a psychoanalyst, and they go to a special school for 2 more years, and then lots more training. They're pushing 40 by the time they're in private practice. But now these are the folks that charge $400 or $500 a session and want to see you several times a week. So I don't know how many of us can afford to see a psychoanalyst. All right, so psychiatrists are medical doctors, and they are the only people that can prescribe medication. Okay, there's a couple exceptions. They're hardly worth going into, but some psychologists in the Army, I believe, can do it. And there's 1 or 2 states that with additional training are allowing psychologists to prescribe a limited number of it. But a psychiatrist is a medical doctor. Everybody else isn't, okay? A psychologist generally is a person who has a graduate degree in psychology. And then we have all these other flavors. We have social workers. We have certified clinical social workers. We have mental health counselors. We have something that's relatively new, 20 to 25 years being relatively new, called an LPC. That's a licensed professional counselor. You get a master's degree in counseling, as one of my degrees is, and then you go sit and you get a license. And primarily that is so you can get reimbursed by, by insurance companies. And I tried that very briefly, and some insurance companies in the late 90s were reimbursing at, I guess, $10 an hour. Can you believe that? I think if you worked hard enough, you could make that at McDonald's. Anyway, so try to keep that part straight. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor. Everybody else isn't. When people are ailing psychologically, I tell them, if it's at all possible, go see a psychiatrist first, because this is what they do. And they're comfortable prescribing the medications. Your GP is a little less comfortable. The DEA is always watching how many controlled substances, and they're not quite as happy writing out prescriptions for Xanax or Valium or whatever. And they'll pretty much, give you an antidepressant, even if you are complaining about anxiety. And, these days, insurance companies don't require you to get a pre-authorization. Psychiatrists are, they're not that much more expensive than doctors. And I imagine, from what I've heard, the deductibles are about the same. But this is what they do all day long. Now, what you're not going to get these days from a psychiatrist is therapy. They're going to manage your medications. So typically a person might see a therapist once a week and see a psychiatrist maybe once every month or 3 months, to tweak their meds. But if you can, especially if you feel like your problem is severe, I would try to see a psychiatrist first. And believe me, I'm not knocking your GP. It's just this is not what they do. They don't get a terrible amount of training in psychology. They get some, and some GPs are very good at this. I don't want to upset GPs. Okay, so let's see. Analog Hole says, I was reading a study that showed that meditation helps with things like dementia and helps increase your mental activity. It supposedly creates more gray matter. It does. It does, actually. Now, you have gray matter and white matter in your brain. Gray matter are essentially, and again, I'm simplifying, the neurons. And white matter is the fatty coating called myelin that covers the transmitting part, the axon of the neuron. And I just read a study about this, and part of the reason it seems to do this is that meditation tends to shut down a lot of your emotions, and it just lets your brain rest. But in a really good study where they did MRIs, they found that even people that started late in life in meditation in MRI showed more gray matter. So yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. All righty. So that was a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Analog. Oh, an American road warrior. It's very seldom I've gotten the feeling a doctor or a psychiatrist really cares. Well, I am sorry to hear that. I've known a lot of psychiatrists in my time, and there were one or two stinkers in there, but I thought they cared. Your general practitioner is too busy. And they are. This is going to sound odd, but they're not paid well. They need to cram in as many patients a day as they can. So, they don't have an hour to talk to you about your feelings of depression or to figure out if you have something else. But, so when you go in to see a psychiatrist, they do have, time to talk to you about that. Okay, let's move on to our next topic here. This is another study. 10 things happy people don't care for. Okay. 10 things happy people don't care for. Age. Doesn't mean they don't care about aging. It means that to a happy person, age is just a number. Okay. They're not obsessed with it. They're not spending their time worrying about aging. Happy people are not overly concerned about what other people think or say. And then that tells me that person has good self-esteem and good self-concept. Because when we do get too wrapped up in what other people think of us, we're giving them an awful lot of power over us. And this could be your parents, it could be your partner, it could be anybody. I mean, these are people you love and care about, but they don't get to be in charge of your brain. And don't put them in charge of your brain. When you get good feedback that makes sense, then yes, of course, use that. But if you like something, somebody else doesn't like something, well, then to hell with them. I mean, you like it, that's good enough. It's kind of like, when someone comes up to you and says, here, try this. Like my girlfriend likes chicken livers. Now, she hasn't done this to me. I'm just using an example. I cannot eat chicken livers, but other people will think because they like them, you will like them too. It's the same kind of thing. We're not all wired the same. Her tongue is wired to like fried chicken livers. My tongue is wired to gag if a chicken liver touches it. Anyway, I think that's a really important one, and I think we really have to learn to, to give ourselves credit to take care of ourselves. Number 3, jobs. That's not to say happy people are unemployed. The key idea, and again, this is a really good one, is that you're not your job. Your job is part of your life, and it's an important part of your life. It puts a roof over your head. It provides some socialization, but so much more of you is not your job, your relationships, your hobbies. Maybe you are very active in a church or an organization. We know this is a problem, especially for males, and we'll talk about this on a different show, but when males lose their jobs, they take a big self-esteem hit. And to the point that sometimes they won't even tell people for a while that they've lost their jobs. Fear, that's an interesting one. Fear is not real. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. But too much fear is not real, and happy people will know that. They know that nervousness and anxiety that supposedly comes with fear are not real. They block it out. They get out of their comfort zone, feel a little crazy, and just do what they want anyway. I think what they're saying there is that happy people do not allow themselves to be controlled by fear. Fear becomes a disorder when a person has an inordinate amount of it. One of these shows will cover generalized anxiety disorder, and in that disorder, a person has an unusual amount of fear. The negative state of the world. That's a lot of disturbing. There is a lot of disturbing stuff going on in the world. Happy people don't deny any of these, but they do a good job in making sure it doesn't affect how they feel. Again, it's good to know what's going on in the world, but we don't have to, put the world in charge of our brain. We can take in the news and decide, what we think of it, and then move on from there. And let's see. I tell you what, I'll save the next couple for after our break.
Hello, IRN listeners. This is MJ saying hello and sharing an awesome secret I discovered. It's called DreamNuage.com. Fresh, raw, organic ingredients are used to create all their products. They are made in very small batches to ensure quality and freshness. Handmade in the USA, each product is created with care and with the finest organic ingredients. There are no preservatives, dyes, or chemicals in any product. Stop by Dream Nuage and relax. That's DreamNuage.com. Simple, raw, organic.
Hello, everyone. Lorian Fenton here, host of the California MUFON radio show, asking if you'd like special access to exclusive and amazing information about UFOs, the paranormal, and all things unexplained. If you're nodding yes, then join IRN's Insider Club. As an Insider Club member, you'll get an all-access pass to premier Inception Radio Network content for only $4.99 a month. This includes live UFO and paranormal conferences, live streaming UFO skywatches, exclusive IRN radio and TV productions, and of course, paying radio with MJ and Ken Storch. So don't wait any longer. Visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com and click on Member Login to join IRN's Insider Club and get your VIP access today.
Do you have a smartphone? If so, Inception Radio Network is the best app for you. Available on iTunes, Android, Samsung, and most other app stores. Just search Inception Radio Network. With the app you can listen live, check out podcasts of recent and past shows, view our videos, see what shows are coming up, who the guests are, and, via the chat room, send live questions to those guests. You know it makes sense. Check your app store now. Inception Radio Network. I'll see you there. Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ. You're locked into Inception Radio Network, Superior, Wisconsin.
Hey folks, we're back. I hope you got something good to drink or eat or snack or went to the bathroom during our break. The chat room was really neat tonight. I'm enjoying watching the chat as I'm going through some of the subjects. I almost can't keep up with everything. Rachel, you're making lots of really good points. Analog hole as well. Good stuff. Okay, back to happy people, because we all want to be happy people, right? Now or at some point in our life. Let's see. Okay, number 6, toxic people. So happy people don't like toxic people. And what that really means is that they don't put up with it for very long. Toxic people can really bring your own mood down, and they can damage you. Now, that doesn't mean you should dump your friend if your friend's being a little bit annoying. That's not a toxic person. But you know that there's people that you hate to ask them how they're doing because they're never doing well. And I'm sure I've done that myself. Toxic people seem to feel better when they've got something to complain about. And they kind of want to drag you back into the pot with them. Number 7, the past or the future. The past does not exist, neither does the future. This is the foundation of a lot of psychology, that you have to live in the here and now. The past is over, the future hasn't happened yet. Living in the past isn't going to get you anywhere. And living in the future is going to prevent you from building that future, because you can only build a future from what you're doing now. Number 8, expecting anything in return. Start doing things for the sake of doing things. I guess here we're talking about altruism, helping others for the sake of being compassionate. Happy people like to do things for other people and not expect anything in return. Whereas there are other people that keep, very close count. In social psychology, we call those mutual exchange or equal exchange relationships, that each person in the relationship keeps pretty close track that they're getting and giving at a somewhat equal rate. But happy people apparently particularly enjoy helping and not expecting anything in return. Complaining is useless. Happy people know that. Nothing to add to that. Conforming to society standards. Well, to a certain extent you have to, because you don't want to land in jail. But sometimes society gets a little out of whack and asks people to dress a certain way or behave a certain way or be politically correct. And it's up to you. You don't have to do that. You can be who you are. That's why we have the word individual. And what you find is that people that are upbeat, that are happy, that don't complain, these are attractive people, and other people want to be around them. Whereas some people at a young age developed a notion that people are only going to pay attention to you if you're having a problem. And you could see how that could happen. I mean, let's say that you grew up in a big family, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids. And the only time your parents pay attention to you is when something bad has happened, because they're busy. They got 10 kids. So, some kids learn that. They learn, okay, I get attention when things are going badly. And it's, it becomes a habit. And they lose sight of that. And they automatically fall into complaining, because that's what worked. That would come from operant conditioning in psychology. That's what worked. When I was little, complaining got me attention. And I forgot that I'm not little anymore. I'm big, but I still complain, because they have a real fear that if someone says, how you doing? And they said, oh, I'm doing great. The person would say, okay, and then they would walk away. But actually, we like to be around people, that are doing great. For one thing, they're not toxic. Going back to the other one. Let's dip our toes into the paranormal here for a moment. This show is somewhat unique. That somewhat unique doesn't make any sense at all. I'm almost sorry I said that. This show varies a bit from, I think we have 29 shows on Inception Radio Network. But the focus of the show is not paranormal. Okay? But we still dip into it a little bit each week, partly because that's what the network's about, and partly because I am interested in it. I'm just very skeptical. But I call myself a hopeful skeptic. And I do think that we'll figure out some of these things. And I certainly believe in life outside of the Earth. I cannot believe that the universe just has this one little speck on a speck on a speck of a grain of sand, and that's the only place you're going to find life. I'm not sure that we've got 1,000 UFOs a day landing in the Midwest and abducting people. That's harder for me. I have no evidence that they aren't, but I don't have any evidence that they are. And, that brings me to why I think psychologists in particular and people interested in the paranormal, why there's discomfort there. Lorian Fenton, I was listening to her earlier, and she was talking to her guest had a degree in psychology, and she was talking about, that psychologists don't seem to want to talk about the paranormal stuff. And part of it is it's hard to get through an undergrad and a graduate education in psychology or any science without, buying really hard into the scientific method model, which says that we want to know exactly why something happens, and we want to be able to prove it, and we want to be able to replicate it. Okay, so let me give you an example. Apportation, just something kind of moving on its own. So let's say I have a subject who says I can move things with my mind. I'd say, well, that's cool. Let's set you up in a lab. Let's make sure that nothing else in the room could cause it. That there's no air moving around, and that's called controlling for extraneous variables. So the only thing left would be your mind. And let's say, for the sake of argument, that I put a little, 1-inch cube of wood on a desk, and I say, okay, just make it move, even a few inches, just to be safe, I'll duct tape them to their chair. And then, the block moves. When I got a real problem here, I'd be excited, but, I just broke one of the rules of physics. And an object at rest will stay at rest unless a force acts upon it. We don't want Newton rolling over in his grave, do we? Maybe we do. I don't know. Well, we wouldn't know, and it wouldn't do him any harm. He's dead. So, what made it move? We would have to figure that out. And I think a lot of scientists simply say, look, it's hard enough to read brain waves as it is. You have to put electrodes right on the skull, and you've got to use, this goopy stuff to help make sure that the transducers work. And, if it's that hard to even read those brain waves, how are you going to move a block of wood, 2 feet away? And I think that's where the incredulity comes in, is that, if people can do these things, then, do we rewrite physics? Or do we come back and say, boy, we sure have a whole lot of new things to figure out? And I think that's what I think. I think that we would have a whole lot of new things to figure out. I think we are. I was talking to a colleague the other day, and I don't talk about this stuff much at the college. It does tend to make people roll their eyes, which is a shame. But she's a little more open-minded. And we were talking about thought transfer, or ESP. And she agrees that we ought to be able to do that, and that at some point we will figure it out. Our brains will figure it out. Because we have, 100, the generally accepted number is 100 billion neurons. And we don't use an awful lot of them. Part of it is that we need a lot of backup because we don't keep making new ones, or not very many. But thought transfer to me just seems so probable and so plausible. But maybe that's just a matter of evolution. It'll take time. But moving a block of wood with your brain, that's going to be really hard to explain. So a lot of scientists are going to say, I can't even start to do this because then I'm going to have a fight with physics. But I think we should still do it. I think the fact that paranormal psychology doesn't seem to lend itself to the lab doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means that we should do it differently or come at it from a different point of view. Even though, as far as I know, nothing paranormal has ever happened in a lab, doesn't mean we should stop trying. We should keep trying. And I'm trying. I'm working on an ESP project, and this will give me a chance to talk about that and give a shout out to another show. Inception Radio Network also hosts truthfunders.com, and they are a fundraising platform for people who are doing things in the paranormal world. And I am trying to do a study on ESP using Zener cards. And those are the 5 cards that have like a circle or a square or a little squiggly line. It looks like bacon. And I'm trying to raise money doing that. And I've raised a little bit. And you are more than welcome to go there and make a donation to my project or any of the other projects. A lot of really good projects there. But, this is Mark Schwartz, and it's really cool. MJ just put a link up. If conventional science and if the conventional funding mechanisms aren't going to work, then the Mark Schwartzes of the world are going to figure out a way to make it work. So I love Truth Funders. I've raised $190, and I've bought some of the stuff I need. Part of the stuff is my project is on ESP, and I want to buy a rather expensive high-speed camera because one of the variables I want to eliminate are micro expressions. Let's see. I'm sorry, I just got caught up looking at the chat room. I can't run a show and read it constantly, but there's so much cool stuff in there. Rachel, I agree. If you have your own issues going on, and then you are around people who are negative, that's going to do nothing but bad for you. And I don't think it's mean to tell you to cut ties with people like that. I would surround myself with happier people. I would watch comedies on TV. I would read upbeat stuff. I'd go for long walks, and I would try to live outside of my head. I would try to let negative thoughts and anxious thoughts be like a movie. Don't interact with them. Just let them pass by, because thought suppression doesn't work. If you tell yourself, don't think about a white elephant, then all you can think about is the white elephant. Analog Hole asks, what about the whole remote viewing program done by the U.S. and Russia? The U.S. supposedly has something like an 8% success rate. Well, I'm surprised it was that high. I couldn't begin to put together an experiment for remote viewing. There are so many variables. Remote viewing would mean that I could sit here in Walkersville, Maryland, and I could tell you what's going on in, I don't know, in Washington State, or I could tell you where a criminal is. Again, I'm skeptical of it, but I don't say it's impossible. I think they should keep studying it. But the way I've seen it studied, my impression is that the studies are very poorly done. The methodologies are awful. Do it on a tiny scale and control for everything you can, so that when you get a hit, you can say that it's meaningful. When I'm doing the Zener cards with my students, there's 5 Zener cards. So I would randomly expect a 20% success rate, okay? If I reliably got a 30% success rate, that would be significant. That would mean that same subject and another subject could reliably beat the odds over and over and over again. That stuff doesn't tend to happen in a lab, but all it means is that we need to keep trying. So anyway, Analog Hole, I wasn't even aware that they had an 8% success rate. And I don't, that stuff's not published in academia. The CIA certainly doesn't publish. I tell you what I will do this week. I will do a literature search on remote viewing to see if there's anything at all out there. But I doubt that there's going to be anything in academic journals. But if I find it, I will bring it up next week. But by the way, you can go on Amazon and you can buy Zener cards very inexpensively. I mean, $5-10 for a pack of them, and try it, because remember, if it works, your first problem is going to be, is it because I have a good transmitter, or is it because I have a good receiver? So if you got 2 people and it worked, well, then you would want to bring in another person and see if it still works. Is it the transmitter that's actually good at sending and anybody can be a receiver for that person, or is it the receiver that's good at receiving and anyone could be a good transmitter? But we need to always, as American Road Warrior just pointed out, we need to always exceed coincidence, and we more or less use 5%. We want the chance that something happened by coincidence to be less than 5%. But in really rigorous scientific studies, we use P, 0.01. We want the chance of coincidence to be 1% or less. And that would mean that there's a 99% chance that our independent variable is responsible for the results that we're getting. And analog whole, I will check MIT. The nice thing about being a professor is I have access to just about every journal on the planet. They're very expensive, by the way. Colleges spend, I don't know, one of my grad schools spent $2 million a year for online databases of just journals. So anyway, what we need to do is we need to keep trying, and we need to keep going after this. And Truth Funders is an alternative way to raise funds. And I think if we can start getting some results through places like Truth Funders, which Mark Schwartz has just put whole heart and soul in, then maybe we'll start to get the attention of, of some academia, and get more of this back into colleges. The truth about cats and dogs. Pets are good for mental health of everyday people. That's probably falls under common sense, doesn't it? But as I tell my students, everything has to be proven. If you want to say it's a fact, you got to prove it. And in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, they did 3 experiments to examine the potential benefits of pet ownership of what they called everyday people. And we observed evidence that pet owners fared better, both in terms of well-being outcomes and individual differences, than non-owners on several dimensions. Specifically, pet owners had greater self-esteem, were more physically fit, tended to be less lonely, were more conscientious, were more extroverted, tended to be less fearful, and tended to be less preoccupied than non-owners. All right, so raise your hand if you got a pet. I think everybody raised their hand. Well, they were studying cats and dogs. I think it depends on pets. Some people like odd pets. Like I have a rat. I love my rat, but she's very social. She interacts with me. Other people like, spiders or snakes. I don't know that when you come home from work, I don't know. Does this snake jump all over the cage and scream and wave and wag its tail? Or, I think that's probably why they stuck with cats and dogs, because they clearly bond with their owners. And I don't know, if you're in the chat room and you think that pets are good. Oh, there we go. Rachel says, I love my kitties. And cats are wonderful pets. And Rachel has 5 cats. Good for you. Boy, that's a lot of scooping of cat boxes. We just have one, and we just got her. My son wanted one, so we got one from a family who was moving to a house where they're not allowed to have cats. So we adopted Molly, who's 15 months old, and is doing very well. Though our dog, Jules, is extremely jealous. But cats, you talk about paranormal. Cats seem to be able to read your mind. I don't know if it's just wishful thinking, but I grew up with cats. We had 5 cats growing up, and it seemed like if you were feeling sad or down or ill, your cat would come up and curl up against you and try to comfort you. And I think dogs kind of do the same thing. And that's another area of, when they're doing studies like this, I wonder if they realize that in a way they're studying stuff that's kind of paranormal, because we're talking about communication between 2 species. And we don't know how to account for that. Clearly, we communicate with our pets, but I don't think that we know how or why. And their brains are different than ours. Rachel used to volunteer at the shelter. Oh, okay, that's how you ended up with 5. Well, it's a good thing you quit. Otherwise, you'd grow up to be that crazy cat lady that lives down on the corner. But cats are good for you. Dogs are just bigger and take up more room. And some people are cat people and some people are dog people. Our family, well, we have 2 rats. Jameson has a rat, Lily. I have a rat, Annabelle. We have a hamster, Sandy, a dog, Jules, and the cat, Molly. And I'm sure you were just dying to know all that. Anyway, that was, in a way, that was yet another one of those studies that points out the obvious, but it's not obvious until you prove it, and we have to prove it. By the way, I wanted to point out again that at 9 o'clock live, MJ, and we'll be on with Pang Radio, and they'll be talking to, oh my gosh, I lost my note. Oh well, it'll be about the Roswell slides. And are those online somewhere? I keep hearing about the Roswell slides, but I've not seen them. My girlfriend Beth tells me that they're online somewhere. Analog Hole says, I think telepathy is real. I've sort of had a run-in with another person in that regards. She pretty much said to me what I was thinking a couple times. It's possible it's environmental. Yeah, it does. And as we get closer to someone, we do get to where we can predict their behavior. So some of that could be paranormal, and some of that is that your brain is an incredible statistical odds probability generating machine. So it's not surprising sometimes when your phone rings before you look at it, you know who it is because your brain knows it's a likelihood. But that would be an interesting way to come at studying telepathy, and it's what I'm going to do. Right now what I'm doing is that I'm assessing personality, and I'm putting people in groups of 2 that have very, very similar personalities. I'm using the Myers-Briggs test because I think the more similar someone is to another person, I believe the more likely they are to be able to do thought transfer. So that's what my experiment is, and it's up there on Truth Funders. And by the way, Truth Funders is on Wednesday nights. If you're in the chat room, if you scroll down, you'll see the live shows. Okay, so you'll see that on Wednesday. Truth Funders is on at 9 o'clock live, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Supernatural Girls is on at 7:30. I haven't heard that one yet. UFO Headline News, and then let's see, Thursday, Friday. So if you want to know if you're listening to a show live or not, just go to the chat room, and scroll down. So, for example, today is Sunday, and you see Psychology's Outer Limits, and then you see Pang Radio, and they're on for an hour and a half, and that's a fast hour and a half. MJ's show is really good. I've always enjoyed it. I didn't know that MJ was a producer and one of the principals of the network. Those guys work really, really hard. Rachel, question, why do you think we only use 2% of our brains? We really don't know how much of our brains we use. I've heard numbers from, typically you hear numbers like 8, 9, or 10%. First of all, we do need some backup because we don't make new brain cells the same way we make new skin cells. But we understand very little about our brain compared to what we do know. If we have brain damage, something called neuroplasticity kicks in, and other parts of our brain tries to help out, where we've lost brain matter. But Rachel, let me do some research this week and see if there are any actual good answers to what percent we'll use. Because my guess is that at any given time, or over any given time, we probably use all of our brain cells. I mean, they're all alive, but they may not all be firing. But that's a really good question. So I will do a little digging into that. But generally, the accepted number is between 8 and 10% are used actively. But my belief is that at some point in our lives we use them all. And as my son just pointed out, our brain is a massively parallel computer. Instead of having 1 or 2 processors, you have 100 billion, and they work like a computer. A neuron either fires or it doesn't. It's on or it's off. It's just like a bit on a transistor. It's either on or it's off. But it does absolutely amazing things, and we're nowhere close to replicating it with a computer. Let's see. Supposedly, we actually use quite a bit of. Yeah, I think so. Analog Hole, and I will do a little bit of research here, and we're getting close to the end of the show. I want to remind people that you can grab the free apps. We have an iOS app. We have an Android app. Inception Radio Network is on Skype. You can call in. My gosh, so many ways to get a hold. And the chat room, I think that's my favorite, because we get really smart, funny people in the chat room, and it helps produce material for the show as we go along. So next Sunday I will have answers for those 2 questions, or I will try, and we'll look at some other interesting things in the world of psychology, and we will dip our toes into the paranormal once again. But I hope you have a great week. I hope you remember some of the things I said about happy people, and I hope that means that you have a happier week. So this is Professor Williams saying goodbye for this week. See you next Sunday. Have a great week.